Starfinder 2nd Edition just dropped a brand new playtest class, which is pretty exciting. And this is a bit of a wild one. It is a martial character that is incredibly complex and has focus spells, but not traditional spellcasting. Let's dive in. Hello folks, Phil Gallagher, aka Thraben U here for another Starfinder 2e video. I wasn't expecting to make a second video this week, but here we are. The Luminary Playtest has just unexpectedly dropped, and I think it's really neat, and I want to talk about it quite a bit. So I'm going to be doing a few things today. First, I'm going to kind of introduce everything, and then I'm going to give some of my collected initial thoughts at the end yet. Full disclosure, I have spent some time drafting up builds. I have read over this document a few times, but I haven't had a chance to do playtesting with other human beings yet. So this is very much a video that is in the realm of theory rather than practice. And hopefully at the end of the month, I will have a chance to playtest this when I go to a convention. As a technical heads up, tomorrow I will be dropping a second video for this week. It is a really cool skill tier list that is going to be looking at some objective data from some recent books to show you what skills you actually should be taking. But then I will be taking the following week off from this channel since I'm doing 2 videos for this week. Without further ado, let's get into it. So, the first thing that I want to say is that when I started reading this class, I was expecting it to be a spellcaster, and I was just wrong about that fact. So as a heads up here, this name Luminary, this is coming from Latin. Any sort of like lux, lux, lumen root has something to do with light. So the Luminary class is all about literally shining light on people, and one of their biggest class features is going to be shining a spotlight on someone that gives them special abilities. More on that in just a second here. This is a charisma-based class with 8 HP per level, not bad. A pretty good selection of skills here, so they are going to get performance, a skill based on their platform, that's your subclass, and an additional number of skills equal to 5+ your intelligence modifier. You are trained in martial weapons. So again, I was expecting this to be a spellcaster. This is really sort of a highly complex martial that is going to have a lot of options of what it can do with its turns beyond just striking. It has both light and medium armor, and you can see it is trained in a spell DC here. More on that later, as we are going to have focus spells. The overall vibe of this class is often something like an influencer or maybe a director. And they are going to have a spotlight that they will shine on someone, which allows them to get some sort of ability or maybe a debuff based on what role they are going to have. More on that a little bit later. You normally are only going to have one creature in your spotlight, although there are going to be exceptions to this. Your spotlight is going to follow a creature within 120 feet of you. Although you have the ability to move your spotlight as a free action in many cases, or potentially as a reaction with certain class features and feats. If you are playing this at a physical table with miniatures, I recommend doing something like having a condition ring to keep track of who actually has the spotlight at any times, or slide some piece of paper or token under a miniature to show who has the spotlight. It's going to be pretty important to keep track of, so you should have something physically representing that. You also can set your spotlight as a free action when you roll initiative. So if you're really worried about like the action economy of moving your spotlight around, I don't actually think it's going to be all that bad. Your spotlight is going to turn on certain roles that you can give to someone. And if someone, maybe a monster, does not have a role already, you have a one action ability called Cast Roll that can give someone a roll. But the rolls don't do anything unless you are in the spotlight. During your daily preparations, you can give your party members rolls in advance. But if you need to change that roll during combat, you have the ability to do so. I'm going to give the rolls their own section here in just a minute, so we're going to keep moving forward with the other things that you're going to get. You are going to get a platform, which is your subclass, and that'll get its own section in this video. And then you are going to have your own focus spells called Stagecraft spells. Some of these Stagecraft spells are going to come with a special roll, and they may allow you to have a second spotlight on someone. Another thing this class can do is create what is called hard light, which is exactly what it sounds like. It is an object made out of light, but it is a light that has become tangible. And your subclass can kind of dictate what you can do with hard light props. As an aside here, I think the idea of hard light is super, super cool. And I hope upon final release of the class, they are a little more open about what you can do with hard light. I would really, really like to see this expanded, because the idea of a martial character being able to conjure light into like basic shapes and stuff sounds super cool to me, and would give them an amazing angle of utility that they just often don't have. So, simple example, I use my hard light to make a small set of stairs. Now I don't have to make climb checks. I can just walk up and hit that monster. That sort of stuff would absolutely rule, and I would like to see this feature expanded more, or maybe getting more feats that make it even better. Because by baseline, they can be no larger than a 5-foot cube. Then you're going to start getting a lot of stuff that you might expect from like basic martial progression. At third level, you get a rather important reaction, Spotlight Focus. So if a creature begins its turn without the spotlight, you can set the spotlight on the creature. And so again, moving the spotlight around is going to be central to your class, so it makes sense that you just gain abilities to do that. And then you are getting sort of traditional martial style progression. I'm not going to read through all of this stuff, but I do want to highlight one thing, which I think is going to come up later. Galactic Superstar. At 9th level, as long as you're in your own spotlight, your first strike on each of your turns gains a status bonus to its damage roll equal to your charisma modifier. This is something that I'm going to talk about later in terms of design, so I want to point it out right now. The class also is going to ultimately become legendary in perception, which is pretty cool. I think that's enough of a baseline of kind of what is going on with the class. Let's start going into some of these subsections now. And I think I'm going to not go in the order of the document here. I think talking about the roles next actually makes the most sense. So remember, when you're doing your daily preparations, you can choose roles to preemptively give to your party members, so that immediately when they are in the spotlight, they gain the benefits of that role. Some of the roles that you see here are positive, such as Action. Creatures with this role gain a +5 status bonus to their speeds. But some of these are negative, such as Comedy. Creatures with this role take a -1 status penalty to reflex saves. So there are a few of these that you can go and just put on your party members at the beginning of the day and move the spotlight to them when it is necessary. But for many of these, you are going to, maybe do some recall knowledge stuff, figure out what the monster's lowest save is, and then put a roll onto that monster and move the spotlight to them to make them even more vulnerable to the thing that they're already bad at. And you have a roll for each one of the saving throws. Comedy to give a penalty to reflex, Drama to give a penalty to will, and Tragedy for a penalty to fortitude. As of this time, none of these scale up. These roles just are what they are. So at this time, there's no, if you're a master in there's not perception. If you're a master in performance, you can go and make this a -2 status penalty. And if you're legendary, it's -3. There's nothing like that. And I think two things are currently true about the roles. Number one, it is a cool as hell idea. The idea of kind of serving as this director role, moving the spotlight to someone and making them particularly weak against something. I love that idea a lot. I think simultaneously, it is true that the roles are currently incredibly conservative in their design and maybe err on the side of being a little bit weak. So let's look at the ones that you can put onto a player. Epic. Creatures with this role who critically hit with their first strike they make each round cause their target to become dazzled for 1 round. Or Horror. Creatures with this role who critically hit with the first strike they make each round cause their target to become frightened 1. So, those two things don't do anything unless your ally, or I guess you could be the creature with the spotlight on yourself. None of these do anything unless you critically hit, which is not all that common. It might just not only be on a natural 20, sometimes it's on a 19 or even more if the target is already debuffed. But I am not impressed by these options. And similarly, a plus 5-foot status bonus to speeds that never scales up is not overly exciting, and you can often find other status bonuses to speed from other places. I like that the ones for enemies are status penalties, and I think that design is really neat and cool, but I fully expect this to get buffed up in some capacity by final release. I think the most interesting of these starting roles is Irony. Creatures with this role take a -2 status penalty to their highest saving throw modifier and gain a +2 status bonus to their lowest saving throw modifier. This is just a very neat way to kind of game the numbers here. And I'm going to cheat and show off something else right now because I think it just makes sense to. There is an 8th level feat called Trope Deconstruction, which reverses what these things normally do. So you cast a role selecting between comma, dramedy, irony, romance, or tragedy and set a spotlight. And if the role usually gives a status penalty, it gives a status bonus and vice versa. So if you do that role reversal with irony, you can make them take a -2 status penalty to their lowest saving throw and make the thing that they're already bad at even more likely to make them critically fail. There are going to be other roles that you can assign, and many of these are going to come from focus spells or specific feats that you take to give a new role. I really like this role system conceptually, even if I think some of the specific numbers are probably going to get changed and tuned up as design goes on. But this is something more complex than you normally get from a traditional marshal, and it gives them a lot of agency. When I think of Pathfinder 2e marshals, a lot of times their turns aren't particularly complex, and the turns with the Luminary conceptually are much more interesting. And it feels like a marshal that is going to make you think a little bit more, and I like that a lot. I do think that when you compare the power level of some of these roles to the power level of, say, a bard's various support options through composition cantrips, or maybe a witch warper's quantum field, or some of the envoy directives, it feels like the roles are currently a little bit on the weaker side. And I would love to see some changes. I would love to see some things that you can put on allies that make it do things not just when they critically hit, but maybe when they regular hit. But I like what is cooking here. I like it a lot. As we start moving on to the Luminary subclasses called platforms, I think the way you want to evaluate which platform you want is based on which focus spells you're interested in. Each platform is going to give you a skill, give you something specific that you can do with your hard light props, a bonus feat, which is usually but not always a level 1 feat, and then you are going to get access to an initial stagecraft spell. You're going to have options for your platform that include contest, fashion, music, sports, and theater. In terms of what the hardlight props can do, contest can allow you to make things like prizes and game pieces. Fashion gives you disguise. Music lets your hardlight props make sound, which is kind of cool for a light-based object. Sports let you use your hardlight props as improvised weapons that deal 1d4 bludgeoning damage and can be, and have the thrown 20 feet trait. And theater makes your props look more real than normal. As a side note here, as we talk about sports in particular, the idea of these props being improvised weapons is cool, but in a world where everyone is pretty likely to just have access to a gun of some kind, the idea of a 1d4 bludgeoning damage thrown thing is not particularly exciting. Numbers feel really, really weak on that. So let's take a look at these platforms through what they are bringing to the table via their focus spells. The contest first level focus spell Star Contestant is pretty bad, with an asterisk on it that will become apparent in a minute. So you set a spotlight on the target that doesn't move from the target. So this is giving you a second effective spotlight. That target gains the Star Contestant roll for the duration of the spell, in addition to their normally assigned roll. The Star Contestant can turn their bad luck into a thrilling turnabout. When the Star Contestant fails a check, it gets a +1 status bonus the next time it attempts the same check. So this is a focus point to get a +1 to a check after you've already failed a check. That seems kind of like garbage. That seems very bad, and even though it does scale up, when I think about all the like Pathfinder and Starfinder focus spells, using a focus point for this is not particularly exciting. You do get the Star Contestant roll in addition to your normally assigned roll, but again, we already kind of talked about how the rolls are a little weak. So I'm not overly excited about this. Not right now, anyway. But then there is one of my favorite focus spells of all time that is their follow-up feat here, the Wheel of Superstars. This is a 4th level focus spell. It's a 15-foot burst within 60 feet from a spotlight and a duration of 1 minute. You make a giant hologram, a giant spinning flat wheel, and a creature can interact to spin the wheel once per turn. The creature rolls 1d6 and has an effect depending on the result. Now, here's where this Star Contestant thing kicks in. The Star Contestant rolls 1d6 twice and chooses one of the two results. Now, the things you can do here are kind of wild. And this is not a sustained spell. I'm just going to throw that out here right now. And it also says a creature can interact to spin the wheel once per turn, not once per round, so not once per everyone going, once per turn. I'll talk about that more in a second. So, on a 1, the creature takes a -1 status penalty to everything until it spins the wheel again. And if you happen to roll a 1 again the next time you do that, that -1 status penalty to all your checks is increasing by 1. On a 2, you get a reroll on 1 check you attempt before the end of your next turn. But if you do that, you must use the second result. So a 1 is bad. A 2 is kind of interesting. A 3 is 4d8 fire damage on a basic reflex save to all creatures in a 10-foot burst within 60 feet of the wheel. A 4, you become quickened for the duration of the spell or until you spin the wheel again. You can use your extra action each round only for move actions or to interact to spin the wheel. On a 5, regain 4d8 hit points, and if that healing would exceed your missing hit points, the rest is granted as temporary hit points that last for 1 round. And on a 6, you now get a +1 status bonus to all checks for the duration of the spell, and if you hit the jackpot again, you can choose any outcome on the wheel instead. So let us consider what this focus spell can do. And let's just for a moment say that you are playing with a traditional small 4-person party. You could cast this spell on your turn and use your third action to spin the wheel. Your remaining 3 allies could also use 1 action on their turns to spin the wheel. So in the hypothetical world where you have a 4-person party and everyone rolled 3s, you could deal out 4 different instances of this fireworks ability in a single turn cycle, which is kind of cool. And if you are the star contestant and you get to roll 2d6 and pick the better one of these, it is pretty likely that you will be able to get something that is pretty strong from pulling the lever on this slot machine. And many classes don't have great third actions, and being able to give a reasonable third action to your party members is quite strong. The damage and the healing from this does also scale up with spell levels, and I like this a lot. The only thing that I wish was that it was a lower level spell so that I could start playing around with this earlier. This is one of the coolest focus spells I think I have ever seen, and I would like to play with this repeatedly. This is Let's Go Gambling in a very, very fun way, and I think this sets up really cool turn cycles for you where you can use 1 action to shoot a big gun, you use 1 action to pull the lever here, and you use 1 action to cast a roll or do something with your spotlight or perform. We haven't even gotten to that side of this class yet. Demoralize someone with your high charisma score. It feels like there is a lot cooking here. The fashion subclass gives you the trendsetter focus spell, which gives you the trendsetter roll, and you can perform to strike a pose to make a creature within 30 feet of you attempt a reflex save, and on a failure they become clumsy 1 for 2 rounds, or clumsy 2 on a critical failure. And as this scales up, you can do this perform action versus multiple foes. I am not particularly impressed by the fashion subclass. Its follow-up level 4 focus spell doesn't seem amazing to me. So when a spotlighted creature that's in the area, and that's a 30-foot line that's 15 foot wide, casts a spell, performs, or strikes, it can stride up to half its speed as a free action, which is fine. But this is a 4th level focus spell. If you're the trendsetter, you can stride up to your speed instead. Free move action, kind of cool. That's kind of like Quickened. A creature that moves outside of this area becomes dazzled for 1 round. And so that means that you have a very limited area in which you can get free stride or half strides, and if you cast this on the enemy, they become no save dazzled for 1 round, but there's no real penalty to them staying in that area other than maybe having to use a move action to catch up to you. I'm very, very skeptical about this one. The music one, Diva, is very cool. So you set a spotlight on someone and they become the Diva. The Diva can perform once per turn to restore 1d4 hit points to a creature within 120 feet. So this can let anyone turn their third action, as long as they have the Diva roll, into a healing action, and it is a healing action with 120 foot range. 1d4 per spell level is not crazy or anything when you compare it to something like, a soothe or a heal. It's obviously lower than that, but this is repeatable, And if you can shift your spotlight around to make multiple people the diva within a turn cycle, you potentially can get a focus spell that is giving you repeatable healing that multiple party members can use. I have a feeling that this spell is much better than it looks on a piece of paper, where you look at this and go, oh, 1d4 per spell level. I bet the combination of the absurdly high range on this and the fact that you can move your spotlight around actually makes this rather strong. I'm not overly impressed by the 4th level focus spell Star Song Recital, which is a slightly better take on the normal Fascinated, but they do have a 6th level focus spell Grand Crescendo, which is area damage and it gives allies temporary HP as well. So I'm a fan of that. I really like the sports subclass, which is not something that I was expecting. The star player role that you get from the star player focus spell gives the star player 3 temporary hit points. The first time each round the star player successfully hits a creature with a strike, the creature must succeed at a fortitude save against your spell DC or be knocked prone. So earlier, when I was talking about some of the roles being kind of conservative, this is more what I want from a roll. Just regular hit, forcing a saving throw, or someone falls prone is quite strong. I like this roll a lot. And their follow-up 4th rank focus spell is really cool. It is 3 actions. It's called Big Game. Very good range here, 120 feet. It is 2 10-foot bursts, and this is sustained. So you make a fake sports team that creates difficult terrain, and when you cast or sustain it, these areas move up to 20 feet in any direction, causing 4d6 bludgeoning damage with a basic fortitude save. And notably, the star player is immune to this area damage, which is kind of cool. Since this is 2 different 10-foot bursts, you have a lot of agency as a martial character with where you can put your area damage. And the thing that immediately comes to mind here is like the Pathfinder 2e Inventor that can explode, maybe in a 5 or 10-foot emanation from them. You have way more control over your area damage effect than something like that. I had to make a Luminary, I would have a difficult choice to make about whether I wanted to go gambling or do the big game stuff. I think both are really, really cool. The lead actor role is kind of neat. They get a +1 status bonus to checks for actions with the linguistic trait. And the lead actor can perform with the linguistic trait to pull a target into a scene with them for 2 rounds. And all creatures in the same scene are off guard to each other. Now, this is neat because this is guaranteed off guard, and I think you could do this from long range as well. So I think you, with a gun, could say, all right, you're in a scene with me, since I am the lead actor. So I use 1 action to perform, we are off guard to each other, and now I'm going to shoot you and you are off guard. Ranged off guard is kind of cool. Their follow-up soliloquy focus spell makes the rolls better than normal. So you have a roll, and then you can perform to get an effect depending on your roll. And skipping ahead, if you are the lead actor here, you can choose any options each time you perform, even if it doesn't match your current roll. And the effects that you see here are stronger. A higher bonus to speed, fortitude save or become stunned, will save or become frightened, strike if it has resistances, they become a weakness instead, on a hit become dazzled. I like what is going on here a lot. Rounding out this section, since we're just talking about focus spells now anyway, there are like 3 other focus spells that you can take through feats. I like Cameo Appearance quite a bit. You are essentially, for 1 action, casting Illusory Creature, except it's now a hard light construct, and it can't be disbelieved. which is rather important. This deals force damage instead of the normal mental damage. And when you do this, you also get to cast a roll and set a spotlight on your special guest. So there's a lot of words to this spell. But essentially, for one action, you are casting a 2-action spell. And on top of that, you also can give a roll to this thing that you summon and put the spotlight on it. And it can't be disbelieved. And this matters a lot because the tail end of this spell is when a creature disbelieves the illusion, it recovers from half the damage it had taken, and it doesn't take any further damage from it. So this is a pretty big buff to a spell that was already pretty reasonable. It is making it one action. It is taking away the highest downside of it. Force damage versus mental damage. Force damage is probably an upgrade there as well. This is really neat. So I like the sports and the contest subclasses best personally, and those will be the ones that I try out when I get around to playtesting this class. So I want to talk about Luminary Feats now. And you do get one at level 1. And I specifically call this out due to how the subclasses are working here. So your subclasses, aka your platforms, one of the things that they are doing is giving you a bonus feat. But you still get another first level class feat on top of that, which is why I say if you're thinking about what subclass you want to be, what platform you want to have, the tiebreaker should be your focus spell, because it is pretty easy to pick up another one of these class feats by just taking it at first level because you get a Luminary class feat. The one exception to this is the music subclass, which gives you the Dazzling Performance class feat, which is a level 2 class feat. You can get that at level 1 instead. The big thing that the first level Luminary class feats do is let you do more with the performance skill than what you normally can do. And if you were to ask me to kind of rank skills in Pathfinder / Starfinder, the performance skill is usually one of the worst skills. Unless you're playing something like a bard and all of a sudden it is your best skill. The luminaries are going to have automatically scaling proficiency in performance, which means that all of these first level class feats that let you perform to do something else or roll performance instead of the thing that you normally perform with, you get to use your best stat for something that you might be incredibly bad at, and that is rather powerful. So for example, you can use performance to tumble through, to recall knowledge, to do an athletics check to escape, force open, or shove, to demoralize, in place of diplomacy, to request, in place of athletics to high jump, long jump, or acrobatics to grab an edge, as well as potentially deception to feint. And this is a very cool way of making the performance skill matter strongly. Note that not every single Luminary first level feat does do something with performance. So Epic Superhero, for example, gives you a special effects ranged unarmed attack that deals 1d4 bludgeoning damage with a range increment of 30 feet and the Agile trait. Again, though, as I've already mentioned, the damage on that sort of thing in a world where guns are just so abundant and you have martial training is not particularly exciting to me. Note that if you really like all of these things that the Luminary is bringing to the table at first level, and you are like, oh man, I wish I could just get all of those, the level 6 feat multifaceted talent is a good thing to pick up to just give you 2 of these first level Luminary class feats. And I'm not going to go through all of the feats here, but I do want to highlight a couple of feats that I think are interesting or good, and just kind of show off some of what this class is doing. Some of the feats, such as scene transition, are just basic action economy compression, because you often are going to want to cast a roll and set a spotlight on an enemy. So doing anything else while doing some of that stuff is just rather useful. So for example, scene transition, second level feat, you get to stride, cast a roll, and set a spotlight at the same time for 2 actions. So 3 actions for 2 actions, very basic action compression. There's a handful of things like that. I know that I would likely be taking the guest cameo feat at level 4 for that cameo appearance stagecraft spell that I talked about earlier that gives you the better version of illusory creature. You do have the ability with multi-platform Luminary to gain access to the initial stagecraft spells of a platform that you don't initially start with. So if you want to pick up that diva role, but you also want to be, taking the mid-level contest or sports spell, you gain the ability to just dip and grab something else that you might like. And this does mean that by level 6, you can have 3 focus points. At level 8, many builds will be taking their advanced stagecraft spell, but I really like Sponsored Ad Break. This is a super cool one. It's a twice a day ability. It requires that you are live streaming and you have a free hand, but there's a new, I forget what it's called. There's a new robot thing that you can take that just essentially makes it so you are live streaming all the time. So, you initiate an ad break, receiving a gift from a dedicated sponsor and consuming it on the air. A drone delivers a consumable item with an item level no higher than half your level and an activation of 1 action and then leaves. Activate if necessary and consume the item. You can only receive ammunition grenades or spell gems by using Sponsored Ad Break as a 3-action activity. This is really cool. This can potentially get you the perfect item to bail you out of a pretty bad spot. Being able to get a grenade when you desperately need area damage. Being able to get something that is the exact elemental damage type you need to trigger a weakness after you recall knowledge. Being able to get some emergency healing if things have gone bad. Or an item that counteracts a particular disease or something that you have just picked up. There is a lot of potential here. I am not sure how I feel about the level restriction of no higher than half of your level. I don't know if it actually needs that restriction. Like, how crazy is it to get 2 high-level healing potions each day? I don't know that that is all that crazy. There's going to be, like, very specific level breakpoints where this matters a lot, especially since grenade progression is kind of weird. And I think there's like a 4th level grenade and then a 10th level grenade. So there might be some level breakpoints where this is very, very strange. But this is one of my favorite Luminary class feats, excluding the ones that give the focus spells, because the focus spells on this class are just awesome. This feat is like a beautiful baby of like scroll thaumaturgy and prescient consumable / prescient planner. The designers cooked on this one. Along the way, there are a few more roles that you can pick up that have some cool utility. They can make it so that creatures are no longer invisible or potentially make you and your allies invisible. At 10th level, you can pick up 2-point lighting, which allows you to cast a roll and set a spotlight on the same target twice, applying 2 different rolls to them. And this can potentially make it so that you can stack some pretty cool buffs and debuffs onto the same person. There is a lot of potential here, but I think I would need to get into some actual games and do some combats at higher levels to see exactly how busted this could be. I want to highlight the Hot Set feat. This feels like a spell without being a spell. This kind of has kineticist energy. So this is a once per 10-minute ability. You overload one of your spotlights, and each creature in a 20-foot burst around a creature within 60 feet that's under one of your spotlights takes 9d6 fire damage with a basic reflex save. The flames then melt and ignite the surface of the area, making it hazardous terrain for 1 minute, and if a creature moves through that terrain, they take 3 fire damage for every square of the area it moves into. Sort of interestingly, this has the occult tag, which now that I'm flipping back through some of these, a bunch of these things actually have the occult tag, despite this class not actually having occult spellcasting. I'm not the biggest fan of a bunch of the mid-level feats. At 16th level, you can get the advanced stagecraft spell of a platform that isn't your starting one, assuming that you are a master in that skill and you learned the initial epiphany for. There are a couple of very cool high level feats, such as Witty One Liner, that just for one action when you have, or rather for a free action when you have no focus points, you set a spotlight on yourself and regain one focus point. At 20th level, you could become permanently quickened using your extra action to cast a roll, perform, set a spotlight, or stride. Or alternatively, the world is a stage, and once per day you can cast any occult spell of 8th rank or lower as an innate spell, meaning that you get to use your very high charisma modifier. It must be common, or one which you otherwise have access to, and cost as many actions as it would normally take to cast. So that's kind of cool. That gives you access to any spell that you could possibly need once per day, which might just be, an 8th rank healing spell or something like that. But, once you are reaching those capstone levels, sometimes you just need to have that flexibility to get the perfect thing you need to get yourself out of a tricky situation. So, having gone through the Luminary now, kind of explained its features, done a decent amount of thinking about this class, how do I conceptually feel about this? I love the concept. I like the dynamic gameplay of a focus point marshal. The Pathfinder 2e system has some marshals that have focus points, but I kind of feel like many of their focus spells are boring. When we take a look at something like the monk, they can gain the ability to heal themselves, they can gain the ability to get a +1 bonus to their attack rolls. That doesn't excite me. Similarly, something like gravity weapon on a ranger is a good damage buff, but is perhaps not particularly exciting. Whereas the luminary's focus spells are encounter changing, maybe even encounter warping. They have wide area of effects, they have a wide range of ability, the diva ability to potentially gain healing that you can pass around is really cool. I think this is going to be a class that is a little complex for new players and maybe even somewhat experienced players, but I think is going to be very rewarding and very, very satisfying when it is a finished product. I expect we'll see a decent amount of tweaks to some exact numbers and abilities, but I think that's why you playtest, right? I think if you are looking to build a martial character that does a lot of damage, this is not the class for you. This is a class that has basic martial abilities and frameworks, but the focus is on your support abilities. And I like that a lot. I've just started a new campaign, and one of my players is playing an envoy, and they have a bunch of really cool reactions and ways to adapt to combats that are going on, and they have dynamic gameplay loops, and they enjoy that a lot. And I think when you are playing a Luminary, you are going to have that same sort of vibe, where because you have a bunch of different roles that you can give to people that are situationally strong, you're not just doing the same thing every single time. And I like characters and classes that don't do the same thing every time. I like being able to consider my options and do the thing that I think is the best for any given moment. I think if I have one complaint about the class, it's that I wish they got all of the focus spells from their chosen subclass automatically. I hate that I'm going to have to choose whether I take my advanced stagecraft spell or something really, really cool like sponsored ad break or trope deconstruction. the competition in some of these feat levels is very, very high. And I love the focus spells that this class is bringing to the table, so I always want to get them. But having to wait 2 levels to pick up, the really cool trope deconstruction or sponsored ad break makes me a little sad. So I wish the automatically getting the focus spells was baked into the class progression, which I think is okay since they're not getting a bunch of like strong martial damage upgrades or anything like that. Something I already talked about in the introduction is I also wish they could do more with Hard Light. There is a third level focus spell that allows you to sculpt Hard Light. You can make large structures now that are up to 10 feet long, 10 feet wide, and 10 feet tall. I almost just wish that was a class ability that they could do. Honestly, I would be okay if we took like a little bit of the martial stuff away, even to make them have some more kineticist style abilities that they can activate. So overall, I'm going to give this playtest a huge thumbs up. I think back to the Guardian playtest, and one of my players in a campaign I was running tried the Guardian playtest for a few sessions and was like, this isn't ready. And they trained out of Guardian and went into a champion. And this isn't like that at all. I think we're going to see some small adjustments here, but I expect that this class is overall going to end up being very, very cool. I like what is here a lot, and I'm excited for, a year down the line or whatever when we see the final finished version of this product. If you have any thoughts about some things that I missed, or if I got anything wrong, feel free to throw those down in the comments below. And if you have gotten a chance to playtest this already, please let me know what you thought of it in your sessions and what level you were playing at. All right, folks, I hope you have a great rest of the day. See ya.